Hi Piccolo players. Today I'm going to go over Tchaikovsky 4, the last movement excerpt on our last page. I've done a video on the famous solo in the third movement, and I will link that video in the description. So if you're looking for that, you can find that in the description. But right now I'm going to do that last page. This is starting at measure 249. The main things that I'm thinking about, or that I've had to drill for this, starting right at the beginning, that middle E to not be sharp and not do too much wild vibrato on it. I used to have my tuner on when I would practice it, and the E is just always sharp, like super sharp. So I just turned that off. But just try to not be too sharp. As you're going through these 16th notes, I find I have to back off on my air quantity just a little bit, otherwise it gets stumbly. And I think it's because we have to re-articulate every 4. Ta, 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 ta. It's easy for the air to kind of overpower the tongue. Also, especially the first 4 16th notes, going to the E, I'm very aware to try to make my wrist area right here at the top of my hand not move, so that it's just the fingers. It's easy for those notes to kind of like, I always think of it like a bunch of beads on a necklace, and for the whole thing to break and it just goes all over the place. So you want to keep everything connected, so your airstream is connecting all the notes without it going outside of itself, if that makes sense. And then the next big thing is going up that big scale, landing on high A, not to overblow as you ascend. So I know I say not overblow probably in every single video I do, but really right here, it's really easy to, when you get to the high A, to just like to blow out the embouchure, which means like you actually, the top lip actually blows out because you have so much air going forward. So you want to keep the resistance as you go up with your airstream, but not get tight. So you don't want to get tight, because then you get the thing, you know. So if I really clamp down on this scale, it'll sound like, you know, and I get like crack all the way up. You don't want that, but you do want resistance on the airstream as you go up, so you don't blow out your embouchure. The last 4, it should feel very easy, and you don't have to try to be loud. I know it says fortissimo. Like most 2T sections in the piccolo, we're up in the 3rd register, you don't need to try to project. You just want the notes to speak, and it will really have that sparkle. The next set of 16th notes after 253 can be really squirrely in the fingers with all the cross fingerings. Again, I kind of have to, I back off on my air quantity just a little bit, again, so that all the beads in your necklace don't go flying all over the place. I don't know why I have that analogy right now, but when I get up to the top A, G, that G for me is super flat, so I try to make sure that my A arrival is not too high. I just da 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 A. You know, I'm not lipping it down or anything like that, but just try to keep it as low within reason. And then very slight, my bottom lip goes forward so I can have the G be a little high. And you can add a little bit of vibrato on the G to give the illusion that it's higher. Like that. Yeah, and then these, I would practice it in this way. And again, trying to make sure that the wrist here and top of the hand is not moving. And then you're kind of, you know, you can just, what's that called, active rest, as you get through rehearsal H, 257, through all this stuff. There seems like there's some kind of crazy horn thing happening 3 after H. I can't remember now. But once you get to 263, this is where the piccolo gets to shine. So if you're playing it for an audition, you have to play that downbeat D at 263. But if I'm playing it in a rehearsal or concert, non-audition situation, I always leave out that D. So like the measure before 263, I can get a hold of the much better if I just leave out that first D. But if you're doing the audition, of course you cannot do that. And the only thing you can do is make that downbeat D at 263 as short as possible and then get on with it. And no breath. I wouldn't take a breath at 263 right after that D. There's no time. You have to get to the high A exactly by beat 2. One other thing with this little measure right here, from the middle I'll go slow, the measure before. When I go D, D, I also make my embouchure very quickly go to high register mode, which is a smaller aperture, again, not tight, but smaller, so that can come out and the air can really get some velocity. This figure. So it's easy when you're because you're doing the middle register right before that. If you're still in middle register embouchure placement, it just the notes will come out, but you have to use more air, or sometimes the E to F sharp won't speak very well, and you're going to get very tired, and you may not make it all the way. If I do not adjust my embouchure, it'd sound something like. It can be like that. The hole is just too big. And one other thing here, throughout all these 30-second notes, all the F sharps, I do middle F sharp. I just think for me, it's not necessary, but for me, going high E to high F sharp to G is so much cleaner, especially you're going so extremely fast here. It's just very easy to do that. Even like in the middle register, I use that 5 where it says 5 in my music. That means this 5th finger here. I just make sure practicing this, you start slow, like let's say 100, where you can manage everything, maybe even slower, but let's see what 100 is. Probably even start slower. In fact, let's just go slower. It's 96. At 263. And make sure that you're starting the exactly on the ands of whatever beat you're on. Rest and you know, it should be exact. Even as you get faster and faster, it'll just be placed perfectly. But with that in mind, right at 263, like that. You really should aim for that in your practicing, for it to be clean and rhythmically perfect on the entrance. The second line of this, where the insanity starts, at 266. I like to practice this figure or line in this way. This is my favorite way, and you can do it from slow speed going all the way up to fast speed. That first note of the run, that's the most important thing. C, G, C, da, B, da, A sharp, A, G sharp, G, F sharp. So there is a pattern. And I find that my eyes you can't read all that fast. So you're just going through the patterns, getting the first note and going up the pattern. So practicing C, B, A sharp, A, you know, you're practicing the muscle memory going to the next figure. It's a great way to practice. Another way to practice is similar, just maybe do two little rips. And reset your mind. And then of course you could do 3 of them like that. Another practice strategy that I always use in an excerpt like this, where it's just trying to gain speed in a technical passage, is to start practicing it at a very, very slow metronome marking and keeping track by writing it down on a Post-it note, and then practicing just going up in ones slowly over the course. If I have the time to do that, it takes like a whole week or 2 weeks or whatever. So like for this one, you can see my Post-it note that I have on my music. I started at 100 just for time. So I could though start much slower so that I really get everything perfect. But like I could even start, we'll just say 88, and starting at 263, and I feel like, okay, I felt in control, and I'll move it up to 89. And I might do that, I don't know, 3-4 times in a practice session, and then mark where I left off, and I write it down on the Post-it note. I do some alternate fingerings in the last 30-second note run at 268. And you can see in my handwriting here the harmonics. Doing G for D, A for E, B for the F sharp, and then you could do a C for the high G, but I think I do regular G. Let me see. Regular high G once you get there. That always works for me for that last little brilliant. It's the same notes that start this whole pattern at 266, but I always do the real fingering there. But you could do that at the beginning of this passage. I think because they're harmonics, they're a little bit more unstable, so I never start off like that way. But when I've gotten that airspeed, really going, and at the very last, I just always do the harmonics there, and it's always worked for me. Okay, so those are my strategies for how I take on this particular excerpt. And please hit subscribe to this channel. I have a whole series on these practice guides for orchestral piccolo parts that you can see here. I'm continually adding to that. And let me know if you have any requests for future practice guides. I have a few things in mind to do for the next few videos, but if you would like me to do a video on a particular piece, I'd be more than happy to put that in the queue and get to that as well. All right, happy practicing, and I'll see you at the next video.